Last night at 11 o'clock, police say this shooting was targeted, and it was at a group of men who were playing basketball at the time.
Let me guess. A mass shooting, right? Hey guys, before we get rolling, check the link down in the description below for the TriStar Trading link and go there, buy you some cool stuff. A lot of cool t-shirts over there. I've actually ended all of my t-shirts at the other place that they used to be at, and now I have a line of t-shirts at TriStar Trading. They also have a lot of other really cool stuff like this Whoopee jacket right here. Very warm jacket, very thin and lightweight, but super warm. So down here in Louisiana, our temperature is good. They were 78 2 days ago, and now they're 48. So I like something like this. I can throw in the truck. I can keep around the house, whatever. Super warm. But a lot of cool t-shirts, a lot of cool stuff over there. Check it out. The link is in the description down below. Again, TriStar Trading. Check them out.
There is now a $2,000 reward for information leading to an arrest after a Lansdowne High School student was shot and killed Tuesday afternoon. Police say already several people have been questioned in this, but they are still looking for that gunman who is believed to have targeted that 16-year-old victim while at a strip mall across the street from the high school before following him then onto school grounds and shooting him several more times. The victim's name has not yet been released. And tonight in Anne Arundel County, police there are asking for your help as they look into that deadly shooting last night in the area of a basketball court in Severn. As we first told you last night at 11 o'clock, police say this shooting was targeted, and it was at a group of men who were playing basketball at the time. 2 men were killed, a third was shot, and a fourth was hit by shrapnel. Police have not identified any suspects in that case. These deadly acts of gun violence come as lawmakers in Annapolis looking at potentially banning a range of firearms now that are often used during these kinds of crimes in our local communities. Maryland could ban the sale of semi-automatic handguns that can be easily converted into machine guns. WJZ Live at 11 o'clock tonight. Kelsey Kushner has more on that push and what both sides are saying about this. Kelsey.
Rick, well, good evening to you. And, you know, like you just said, we should say right now that Maryland does have Glock switches that are banned in Maryland. But this piece of legislation focuses primarily on that firearm itself and banning that weapon that is easy to manipulate to make it a fully automatic weapon. But those who are against this legislation say that it is written way too broad, and they believe this is a political stunt.
Once installed, Glock switches allow pistols to fire up to 1,200 rounds per minute.
It's an alarming number of rounds fired off in just seconds with the help of a Glock switch, a device often 3D printed that local leaders are now pushing back against.
In the last 2 years, over 100 convertible pistols with the switches have been found by Baltimore City Police Department.
At a Judiciary Committee hearing Wednesday, law enforcement from across the state and gun violence prevention groups put support behind HB 1287, a bill that, if passed, would prohibit the sale of pistols that are easily convertible into machine guns with the use of a Glock switch or auto sear.
When you see that amount of rounds on the ground and the devastation that it can cause, it really makes you think about how much damage these weapons with the switches, with the sears, can do.
Glock switches give semi-automatic weapons the ability to shoot fully automatic by preventing the firing pin from locking back when the trigger is pulled. The firing pin is then able to keep a free range of motion, allowing a rapid rate of fire in one trigger pull. It was also the gun used in a mass shooting at Morgan State University 2 years ago that injured 5 people during homecoming.
This was rapid fire. It was very quick.
It will be a boon for the traffickers. They will still be making their homemade Glock switch.
But those against the legislation say the bill is too broad and won't force Glock to change its designs.
This is not a targeted solution. It's a sweeping approach that could strip Marylanders of their constitutional rights to own some of the most common and reliable firearms.
Now, Baltimore City has already filed a lawsuit against the manufacturer Glock, saying that their designs are too easy to manipulate and therefore fail to protect the public.
Okay, first of all, I need to debunk some of these lies. These news agencies, they get away with way too much of this. And believe me, guys, I have a story in a couple of weeks that's going to blow your mind as far as the media being allowed to lie to the American people. But some of these lies. The design is too easy to manipulate, so it's Glock's fault. Really. It's funny how we are entrenched right in the middle of this age of no accountability. Nobody wants to take accountability for anything, so we sit back and we wonder, who can we blame? Whose fault must this be? Well, it must be Glock, because they have a 30, 40-year-old design. They couldn't have foreseen the fact that there would be switches in the hood that people would want to fix to their Glocks and make full auto. I mean, shame on Glock for that. The Glock semi-automatic pistol was made, let's give them the benefit of the doubt, saying as late as 1982. This is when that pistol design was manufactured in full production runs. The Glock switch, as it is referred to, was invented in 1987. So it was invented 5 years after the Glock was invented. So there was no such thing 5 years prior when the Glock actually came to market. And actually the auto sear was not approved as far as the patent goes until 98. So, I mean, we're talking about a good 16 years after the Glock was introduced before anybody really even saw the quote Glock switch. And another lie, I have to throw this in there, is that they mentioned that the Morgan State University homecoming was marred by gun violence. They always like to use that term. And they like to call this a mass shooting, as they did in that news report. But this was interesting. From that same story, investigators believe there was a dispute between two groups, gangs, when gunfire erupted near a dorm on the university's campus. 5 people were injured from, again, 2 opposing parties shooting at each other. This was not a mass shooting. This was not the definition of a mass shooting that most Americans believe in. This is the definition of a mass shooting that was made up by the anti-gun movement to make all shootings appear as if it's a pop-off, random mass shooting. The other lie also had to do with the Glock switch manufacturing time and the Glock itself. Maryland's Attorney General lied in the article, stating that since 1990, Glock has manufactured a pistol that can easily be converted into a machine gun. That's an outright lie. Because again, they're missing this now by 8 years. They're not even using the actual truth of this. And by this year, since 1990, that would imply that the Glock switch was actually designed 3 years before the Glock itself was designed. So apparently, according to this Attorney General in Maryland, the developer, the inventor of the quote Glock switch, knew about the Glock design before it even became a Glock. So maybe the guy who made the Glock switch should get credit for developing a Glock too, since he knew exactly how to make a modification before the gun even went to market. These politicians lie. This is an attorney general of a state lying. They take liberty to lie like this because they know the average person is not going to take the time to do a simple online search to determine these people are lying to you to try to make a case. What this attorney general is trying to do is convince the people to put pressure on actual politicians within the state to pass these unconstitutional laws by lying to them. Now let's look at the bill. This is pretty cute. I always get a kick out of politicians who knew nothing about firearms inventing new terms. Now we have a term called a convertible pistol. This is in House Bill 1287. That's cute. So now we are going to refer to a pistol that can receive or accept a Glock switch to make it fully automatic. We're going to call that a convertible pistol now. We also had a couple of other little nuggets. I like the fact that now we are going to refer to some firearms as assault pistols. Not just assault guns, not just assault weapons or assault rifles. Now we have assault pistols. So 2 new terms being invented here. Interesting that the anti-gun movement somehow becomes the experts on renaming firearms, and we are never actually asked our opinion on this as the actual experts ourselves. Now there's a full list of firearms that they list down here as being assault pistols, but none of that really matters in this bill. A lot of this is fluff simply to make you think they're going after specific things. And then they drop this nugget that is a massively broad blanket that they throw over tons of firearms out there. This is the only part of this entire bill that matters. They state a convertible pistol means any semi-automatic pistol that can be converted into a machine gun solely by the attachment of a switch auto sear. So this means that any, you want to call them a polymer 80, any 80% firearm that's manufactured, any 3D printed gun, any commercially available semi-automatic handguns that are out there now, which are the most popular firearm, especially when it comes to self-defense. Now they're saying that all of these pistols, millions and millions and millions of these, will now be considered a convertible pistol. And that means that they would be illegal in the state of Maryland, because simply a criminal could take an illegal thing and put on it and make it fully automatic. Therefore, if you own one, you would be a criminal, even though you haven't done what the criminals want to do by converting your semi-automatic into a fully automatic with an illegal item. Yeah, you won't get a say in that. They've already determined that. Now, this bill hasn't passed yet. I'm just telling you what's being floated out there and how they're using the lies to try to promote the goodness of something like this. But this is a very overarching bill out there that's going to affect a lot of firearms out there. It will essentially, and this is what their ultimate goal is anyway, it will essentially disarm people who are afraid to get in trouble, and it will put gun companies out of business because, again, as I stated a moment ago, this is one of the most, not just the Glock, but semi-automatic 9mm handguns is the most popular firearm in regards to people protecting themselves, their homes, their families. So you would ultimately take the biggest chunk of the firearm industry and make it illegal in the state of Maryland. Now, one thing that I always talk about when I reference these bills, when people look at this nationally, I know I'm down here in Louisiana. People in Louisiana, Texas, all through the South especially, because these bills usually don't make their way down here, you're probably thinking, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to Maryland, certainly never going to live in Maryland. Well, these state laws that are crazy, these wacko laws out there that sound stupid to us and sound very unconstitutional because they are, the threat of them is that it normalizes this type of stupidity. It normalizes this type of anti-Second Amendment stance. It makes people, and I don't mean that we get duped into that, but the general public who doesn't really have a strong position on the Second Amendment looks at these types of things, and the first time they hear them might go, that sounds kind of stupid. Second time they hear them, they might think, that sounds a little stupid. The third time they hear them, I've heard about that before. The fourth time they hear them, well, that sounds reasonable. Next thing you know, it's normalized in some of those minds. Those people vote. So it does matter. Those people can make phone calls to these same politicians that are putting these laws into place. So if you can get somebody like in a state of Maryland that has a relatively decent population, and you have plenty of other states that are watching this also going, that's cool, like Colorado. Don't think Colorado, Washington State wouldn't be right behind trying to do this same thing. To go, oh, cool, that worked in Maryland. Let's do it over here. Next thing you know, you got various pockets of the country who are normalizing this whole convertible firearm thing, which again is the most popular firearm in the country as far as protecting ourselves, our families, and our stuff, right? So this would be a way to, again, that's what their intent is, to disarm Americans, good people, and to put many in the firearms industry out of business. There are firearms companies out there that only manufacture firearms that they're referring to in this bill. So it would put them completely out of business, at least in those states. So again, my explanation of this type of threat to the nation is the fact that sooner or later, somebody at the federal level will put this same type of bill out there. And depending on who's running Congress, the Senate, and the presidency at the time, there's a very real chance that these things could go into law and disarm most of America by doing so. Now, one of the biggest complaints I always have is they always want to introduce new gun laws. We're talking about putting a new law in place for something that would criminalize millions of people whenever there's a really small subset of people who are the problem. Those people are the criminals. The new laws don't matter to them. The gun that they're putting the Glock switch on is probably already stolen. they've already committed a crime. They put it on there to commit another crime. So you're not going to change anything on the street. In fact, the Glock switchers are already outlawed, and you are admitting that they're a problem. So if you outlaw the guns that the Glock switchers go onto, that problem will still not go away. So all of this stuff that you want to outlaw, all it does is take it away from the people who don't want to get into some kind of trouble. Now, many of us, you're not disarming me. You can outlaw this all you want. You better come check my backyard. You better come check. I'm not getting rid of my stuff. I'm certainly not forfeiting the stuff that I have to protect my family because you passed some silly little law. But that's ultimately what happens. There are people out there that are afraid that they're going to come crossways with the law, even though they know they're never going to come in contact with any kind of law enforcement. They're going to disarm themselves for the fear of going to jail or getting fined. Now that brings me to my next topic. The laws themselves. They let these people plead down. These gun charges are almost always plead down. Yeah, the laws are on the books. But whenever they want Tyrone to rat out Gary, all they do is they tell Tyrone, hey man, if you tell us who's supplying all this, meaning Gary, we'll drop the gun charge. That new gun law that we just implemented, yeah, we'll drop that. You just help us find Gary. And Tyrone's like, cool. Gun charge goes out the window. Guy's back on the street. Guess what he's going to go get? A Glock with a Glock switch. And this bill is no different. This is proof right here that these people are really not serious about public safety. They're only serious about disarming honest, law-abiding Americans. Look at the penalties associated with this. These penalties are a joke. A person who uses a, quote, assault weapon, a rapid-fire activator, or a magazine that has a capacity of more than 10 rounds of ammunition in the commission of a felony or a crime of violence, you get a misdemeanor. Misdemeanor, right? Now this is even better. This is the person who's not even committing a crime. They just have one. A person who violates this subtitle is guilty of a misdemeanor, and on conviction is subject to imprisonment not exceeding 3 years or a fine not exceeding $5,000. So you are going to get charged with a misdemeanor, and you might get a max of 3 years, and you might get fined $5,000. What that means is you won't get that. You'll get less than 3 years. You'll get fined less than $5,000 if you're even fined and if you're even imprisoned. So you're going to have a misdemeanor on your record. Whoop-de-doo. Whoop-de-doo. You know what you can still do? Go buy another gun. This doesn't prevent anything. You got a misdemeanor. You probably could spit on the sidewalk in some cities and get the same amount of charge as this misdemeanor right here. I'm not saying that I want a stiffer penalty. This is stupid. This is the thing that they're allowing so that the pro-gun people don't get too mad about it because the penalties aren't so bad, which is silly. And to me, that's a cave-in by those people anyway that call themselves pro-gun. But this is clear evidence that this bill is not intended for public safety. Because if it were, and if you were really convinced that this was going to contribute to public safety, you would put massively strict penalties on this. You know how we have a really strict penalty on murder? If you were convinced that stopping people from murdering people would stop people from murdering people, you put a really strong penalty on it, right? Sometimes death. But they're not convinced that this has any impact on safety for the community. So rather than screw up and have people executed for carrying a convertible handgun, we're going to put something very insignificant on here. In fact, something so insignificant that if it's plead away in a plea deal, doesn't really matter because there wasn't any real teeth in this anyway. This is the proof that they know this is not going to affect public safety in any kind of way. It's just a matter of somebody feeling like they're doing something by passing a new law. And again, it's only going to affect people who choose to follow that law, which would be honest, law-abiding Americans who don't want to get crossways with law enforcement.